All right. Hello, everyone. I am here with Richard Newman. I'm really excited for us to kick off this conversation today. And Richard, I'll let you do your introduction. Tell us who you are, what you do, and the impact you're looking to make on the world.
Sure, thanks, Angela. I'm Richard Newman. I am the founder of Body Talk. I am generally teaching people communication skills, working with them on mindset, storytelling, and influence. And I've been doing this a long time now. I've been running my company for 23 years. But before that, I've been fascinated with communication and really wanting to make a difference on the world for a long time. So I think unusually, when I finished school, most of my friends just went off to sort of university. A couple of them went straight to get jobs, but I didn't. I was really profoundly moved by, there was somebody who came and did a speech at my school when I was 17 going on 18 years old about what he had done after he finished school. And he, instead of going to university, he decided that he would go off to live near Kathmandu, where he was working in an orphanage. And he talked about this incredible adventure he'd gone on. And at the end of his talk, he said, okay, so show of hands, who in the room here is thinking about taking a gap year, taking a year off before university and doing something like I did? And I raised my hand. And maybe two other people in the room out of about 150 students raised their hands. And I sort of looked at my hand in surprise, thinking, that's strange. I wasn't planning to do this at all, but he's inspired me to do something. I was very much on the path of, I had like university places lined up and so on. And I then decided, no, this is what I want to do, because I knew that I'd grown up from a relatively comfortable background and I really wanted to do something meaningful for the world. And so I then looked at various different options, and I ended up traveling across to northeast India, where I was living in a Tibetan monastery, helping Tibetans who were in exile from their country. And I was living there up in the foothills of the Himalayas, teaching English to these Tibetan monks. And for them, they needed to learn how to speak English because they needed to get sponsorship so they could continue their life and their practice. And so when I arrived there, what I didn't realize is that they didn't speak English already. And so I had to use body language and tone of voice just to be understood, to hear with, to connect with them, to help them understand me. And by the end of 6 months of living with them, they then got to the point of being able to have a decent conversation in English. I learned how to speak Nepali, which was the main language of the area of India that I was staying in. And I came back to the UK really passionate about the idea of what I'd learned about communication, this depth of communication you can have with somebody beyond the level of just verbal interaction, and was fascinated by it. I then studied acting in London for 3 years, where I was really learning more about stage presence and storytelling and all those things before then launching my business. I think really at the heart of my business has always been the sense that I knew that I was not good at communication when I was growing up. My other friends seemed to know what they were doing with it, but I didn't. And it wasn't until recently that I really understood why that was. So I was quite shy as a child. I'm highly introverted, and I've also been recently diagnosed autistic. And so I had various different challenges that were going on then, but I just decided I would invest time and effort into learning communication skills from my perspective, getting to the point at which I then was succeeding with that, and I wanted other people to find their voice, just as I was giving the Tibetan monks their voice in a way, being able to connect with people outside their monastery. I wanted to help other people find their voice in the workplace so that they can put good ideas into action and really make a difference in the world in the way that they want to.
I love that. And I love the kind of the chain reaction that happened from sitting in that seat and listening to the speaker who
Mm,
influenced you, and then you kind of took a different path, and that led you
mm,
here. So tell us a little bit more about um, the connection between, I guess, influence and impact, because I know you wrote a book, and uh,
mm.
I'm I'm on my way to, I think it's launching soon. Yes,
It
or
is,
has
yeah,
it
yeah.
launched
So
already?
Lift Your Impact coming out May 2nd, 2023. So depending on when people listen to this, it may already be out.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm really proud of this, and I've been working on it for a good long time. I had a previous book that I launched about 5 years ago, was it now? Which was You Were Born to Speak, which was purely about communication skills. And this new book I created to help people where I've really seen over the last couple of years that people have been struggling with all sorts of stress and pressure of working
Mm.
from home and being disconnected from the people around them, and really questioning the purpose of what they're doing in day-to-day life, rather than sort of showing up for the average treadmill of going into work and being on the career ladder. I think that the pandemic gave a lot of people that moment to sit back and think, well, who am I and what am I doing and why am I doing this? And do I want to
Mm.
keep on doing this? Do I really want to do this, just exchange my time for money in this direction? Or do I want to do something else that's more meaningful? And I saw a lot of people struggling with their mindset. Saw a lot of people struggling with connection as well. We saw this recently from data that people's ability to just get on with each other has gone down significantly since before the pandemic, because we're
Mm.
spending less time around, just grabbing a coffee break with people at work or standing around a water cooler. We have just less of that day-to-day physical interaction and engagement. And so I wanted to help people return to having a really strong mindset, stronger than maybe they've had before, a strong sense of purpose and direction in their lives, and also then having the communication skills to get there. So to come back to your question around what is the difference between influence and impact? So I think that, in the past, maybe in the 80s and 90s, people wanted to have influence because they were like, okay, I want to get out there and I want to make some money and I'm going to buy some stocks and shares and get a nice sort of fast car, get a big sort of red sports car, and that's what I want to do. And let's go. Let's go in that direction. And you can influence people and end up going in a direction that maybe isn't so good for the planet or for other people around you. And there's plenty of books out there that will tell you this is the way to manipulate those around you to give you what you want, which is like a win-lose situation. And that's not what I'm about at all. So I always care about is the influence and the impact. So putting people in a position where they are able to have deeper connections with people, stronger relationships with them, able to influence the hearts and minds of the stakeholders around them, whether that's their family or at work, but also to think about, well, what is the impact that you're aiming for? And so, what is the impact when you leave a room, when you've spoken to someone? Do they feel disheartened, disappointed, or do they feel elevated by you? And part of the reason I called my book Lift Your Impact is that element of lift is, what if you could go into every interaction and you could take anybody who you're speaking to from a negative or a neutral state up to an elevated or lifted state. And by doing so, you've really lifted your impact and you create a lovely ripple effect, just like that guy I spoke to you about before, who was standing
Mm.
on stage at my school assembly back when I was sort of 17, 18 years old. I've been trying to track him down actually to thank him for the
Mm.
effect that he had on my life, but he doesn't know that he inspired me. I then went and worked with those monks, and my team have subsequently trained 120,000 people. Like, he doesn't know what happened there, but just imagine, what you could do, how many people you interact with day after day. Anybody listening to this, how many people do you interact with in an average week or an average year? And once you've interacted with them, what is the impact of that? What does that go on to be? Because whatever happens next ends up truly being your legacy, the legacy of impact that you've
Mm.
created. So I always like to get people thinking about, what is my path? What is my true north? Where do I want to head to? What interaction skills do I need that are going to get me there, such that I influence people towards a really positive impact?
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we hear, I love what you said about kind of what we've been taught around this idea of influence, and where it's a positive force for good if we harness it, but we've kind of centered it on maybe selfish aims. So if we just like
Mm,
centered it on a little bit of a serving mentality or a selflessness, we can really harness some power. And
mm,
as a fellow introvert, I would maybe call myself an ambivert because I kind of toggle between the two. I'm really right in the
mm,
middle there. Some people are listening to the maybe introverts
mm,
or folks who are neurodiverse and are thinking,
mm,
wow, that sounds like maybe something that feels uncharacteristic to me, like to be able to walk
mm,
into a room and kind of perform even. But
mm.
I know you see it differently, so tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about how you see that.
Yeah, so I mean, the lens that I've always had on communication, I've known is different. Where I've essentially been looking at communication as an outsider, trying to figure out what is it that people are doing that makes communication work. So to really break this down, from my perspective, when I see people having banter back and forth, what I see is two people insulting each other and then laughing in each other's faces. And as you can imagine, when I've tried it in the past, it gets a really bad reaction. I'll just look at them and think, but I've done exactly what you did. Now, like, what
Hmm.
did I miss? What are you doing that I didn't do? And for me, the secret bullet, if you like, was always this concept of lift. So if you think about what people are doing when they have banter, is that they may say insulting things, they may laugh in each other's faces, but their intention is lift. They want the other person's state to be elevated as a result of the interaction rather than depleted. That's when you know it's truly banter. And there's the opposite of that, where you can see people just being mean and cruel and then laughing and saying, "Oh, it's just it's just banter," but it isn't really. So that true banter has that element of elevating the other person's state. And so that was one of the elements that I noticed in communication as I studied it, really feeling like an outsider from a very early age. And then, I looked at all kinds of books, all kinds of research around communication to figure out what is it truly that you can do that works every time, works with people from all the way around the world. I then studied it through, I worked for 5 years. I was working with a Formula One racing team where they had these events where they were speaking to sponsors from all over the globe who would come in and work with them. They had to essentially convince them to keep on investing their money, because those cars are expensive to run, and they'd want the investors to put their logo on the side of the car so that they could then go on and continue racing. And I was there to host events for them and speak to them. And essentially I was given a script that was a 2-hour long presentation that I was to deliver word for word. I couldn't change it because it was legally approved and it was statistically correct. And I had to deliver it in a way that was going to engage people. And I then delivered that 200 times per year for 5 years. So I delivered exactly the same information 1,000 times to 1,000 groups of people. And I was able from that experience to see, okay, how do people react when I say things this way versus this way? If I change my body language slightly, if I change my intonation slightly, do I get a different degree of engagement from them? Does it work every time? Does it work for people from all backgrounds? And so I started to put that into a methodology of thinking, okay, I think this is working, which led me towards a study that we published. I forget the year. I think it was 2016, I want to say, that was published in the journal Psychology, where we put together this study that showed, involving people from all over the world, if you make slight changes in your behavior, it dramatically improves your impact on the people around you. Plus, it makes you feel better when you're doing it. So as an introvert, you can then sort of stand on stage, stand in front of a boardroom meeting, feel good, present well, and people feel that you're in command of a situation. They are convinced by your message. And the sort of the stunning element of these statistics we came out with, which was really unexpected from this study, is that if you make a couple of changes, you can have 42% more people convinced by what you're saying when you're saying the same information. And you could get 59% more people to vote for you in an election when you haven't changed anything. You're wearing the same clothes, you're saying the same words, but you are behaving in a way that is gaining much more engagement and convincing many more people. And so what I love to do is to share this with people. And I love training people who are introverts around this, because they go, this is amazing. I want to learn all this stuff. I can put it into action. It works every time. And importantly, what we're teaching, it's not techniques that sort of take people away from themselves. It's actually bringing themselves back to who they are. Because what we tend to do is get in a rut with our communication style, where I've talked to so many people who say, 10 years ago, I was told not to gesture when I express myself, because people said I was just flapping my arms around. So I just sit on my hands when I'm communicating, which is not good for interaction. It's not good for your flow of thoughts either. So we talk to them about various things that they can do to come back to themselves, to open up their style, not to be like other people, but to open up their way of communicating. And by so doing, I've trained so many introverts over the years, people who are neurodiverse as well. It just gives you a path to think, okay, this is a way for me to open up my potential, to be more of me when I need to be, and to get more engagement. And that has been a huge pleasure for me, to be able to show people who previously felt they didn't have a voice, that actually there are things that you can do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think we've been taught that we have to like perform when we're speaking, when we're
Mm.
giving. I'm also a speaker, so I have that anxiety every time before I'm going to speak, because I sense a great sense of responsibility to the
Mm.
people that you're serving in that moment, right? So you
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
be of service and you want to have an impact. And
Mm.
so, are you willing to share some of those tactics that
Sure.
folks can maybe tweak or just adjust to get that impact?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there actually the anxiety that you might feel before going on stage. I have a whole like pre-event routine that I use,
Mm.
and I was mentioning to you before that because I know you're based in Chicago. I was in Chicago just a couple of months back, and there I was doing an event. It was at the Hilton Hotel, and there's a ballroom there that I think, if I get this right, it's like 22,000 square feet or square meters. I forget, but it's like a vast place. It takes thousands of people,
Wow.
and I knew that I would be speaking on the main stage as like the closing keynote speaker. And people would say to me before that sort of event, are you nervous about this? And I've always learned this trick, and people may have come across this, that you don't say that you're nervous, you say that you're excited. So you say, no, I'm
Mm.
not nervous, I'm excited. And the reason this is beneficial, I think this has gone around the internet a little bit as well, is that if you're feeling nervous, then what happens is you have a high heart rate, you might have high clavicular breathing, you might have heightened levels of cortisol and adrenaline in the system. And if you say to yourself, I'm calm, your monkey mind, the little voice in your head says, "You're not calm. Look, I can feel your heart beating through your chest. You're not calm. This is ridiculous." But if you say to your monkey mind, "It's okay. I'm not nervous. I'm actually excited," then this little voice in your head says, "Oh, he's excited. That's why his heart's beating so
Mm.
fast, and that's why he's feeling this way. Ah, okay, we should let this guy relax and just sort of do his best because he's feeling excited." And so that can be part of this situation. But I also say to people that when I'm speaking in front of a room, I also imagine it like I am surfing in an ocean. So I'm a
Mm.
surfer, and that's the ocean. So what you do as a surfer, if you want to get good at it, is that you might have put your board on the beach where it's safe and practice popping up, imagining that you're riding the waves, get into that place. But you can only really ride an ocean. You can't really ride the beach. So when you get out to the ocean, you have to see what the ocean is like. So sometimes the ocean is going to be flat, sometimes it's going to be choppy. So you have to ride what is there. So that's what I imagine doing as a speaker as well. I need to find out, where is the audience now and where do I want to take them to? And as a surfer, ride the energy within the space. By doing that, what it allows me to do is come out of my head into the minds of the audience. So it allows me to get past any sense of self-consciousness. So I'll focus on myself and what I want to say before I go on stage. As soon as I'm on stage, my entire focus is then outwards towards them. So I found that this allows me to get much more settled and feel more connected with the audience. A few other things that I like to do. So the last thing I do before I go on stage is to work on my breathing. So I was always taught, as I trained as an actor, as I think I mentioned earlier in our
Mhm.
conversation, is that I was trained as an actor that you can control your emotions by controlling your breathing. So we were taught to cry on cue and to laugh on cue, and you can trigger this through certain mechanisms of breathing. And so if you imagine that, your breath is connected to all of your emotions. So if you're feeling depressed, then you might sigh. Ah. Or if you're
Mm.
feeling excited, you might gasp. So there's a breath linked to each emotion. So if you are about to go to an important interview or a presentation or speak on a big stage, then if you change your breathing, you can change your emotion and therefore be in control of your state. So my favorite version of this, if I share two, my favorite version I've used for a long time is known as sometimes as box breathing or square breathing, where
Mm.
you can control your heart rate, slow your heart rate down. And the version I like to do is called 5-5-5-2. So I breathe in for 5, hold for 5 to process the oxygen, breathe out for 5, and then hold for 2. And by doing this, you highly oxygenate your system. And
Mm.
oxygen chemically burns off adrenaline. And by slowing down the rate of breathing, you can slow down your heart rate. And if you just do it for 90 seconds, you can move from the sympathetic nervous system across to the parasympathetic nervous system and be in a thoroughly good state. And that's the one that I've done so often now that it's just, when somebody starts introducing me at an event, I'm doing the breathing. That's the only
Mm.
thing I'm thinking about at that point. There's another great one I've come across recently, which people may have heard of, which is the physiological sigh. And this was popularized recently by Andrew Huberman, who I think his podcast is
Mm.
becoming quite well known. And the way that you do this one is that you take 2 breaths in and then a long breath out. And so it sort of sounds
Mm.
like big breath in to begin with, then another top up breath, and then pushing all the air out. And there's good science on this that's come out recently that if you do that for 5 minutes, then 24 hours later, you're still getting the benefits of that it's reducing stress, improves your heart rate variability, and was seen to be more effective than any other style of breathing. So that's a really nice one to be doing too. So these elements are part of my routine. The other piece, just to mention too, which I do all the time, I've done this for 20 years before every event I speak at, is that I do a moving meditation in the morning. So as soon as I wake up, I have my running shoes, my running outfit by the bed. I take all weather clothing so that wherever I am in the world, if I'm in Chicago and it's snowing, I'm still going outside. And so I put on everything I need to. Yeah, very brave sometimes. And I go outside and I do a moving meditation, which simply means that I'm walking, maybe doing a light jog for about 40 minutes, something like that. And I'm simply imagining that day going exactly the way that I want it to go, based on how will I act and how will I react in every situation that's coming up. So you can't in your mindset visualize what other people are going to do because you don't know, but you can visualize how will I act and how will I react. And if you do it as a moving meditation, you get good blood flow going, you get it really into your system. And so I found that to be incredibly powerful, just to set my mindset up ready for the day before anything else happens.
Oh, that's great tips. Thank you for also demonstrating some of the breathing exercises, because I think we hear about these boxed breathing exercises, and I think just hearing you do it is going to provide some tools for people to get back to themselves, which I think is the theme of what you're talking about. So I have to ask, because I did see a recent video of you singing with your favorite singer, Michael Bublé. So did you use any of these tactics? And tell us a little bit more about that, because I think it's fascinating. I would be so nervous.
Yeah, that was a wonderful moment, actually. Yeah, if people want to check it out, I think it's on my LinkedIn and maybe on my Instagram page. So this is an incredible moment where my wife and I have been fans of Michael Bublé since before people really knew who he was, back before his first album even came out. Like we were interested in what he was doing. He's such a great performer. And so we've been to see a few of his concerts. But this one in particular, it was in London. There was about 20,000 people or so in a stadium. And there was like a long catwalk stage that went all the way through the middle of the audience. And we were stood right near the front. And at this point, he'd walked all the way down this catwalk. He was stood right in the middle of the arena. So actually quite a long way from us, like 50 meters away or something like that. And he said, you know what? It's such a privilege to sing to an audience like this. Is there anybody else here who'd like to just have a go and do some singing? And of course, half the audience put their hands up. So there's now like 10,000 people for him to choose from. And I thought, look, we're miles away. He's not going to choose us. And he turns around and he starts walking back towards the main stage, which is where we are. And I'm thinking, he's going to pick me. I genuinely thought quite early on, he's actually going to pick me. And then he came towards me. I could see him looking at me, and he went, you, and gave me the microphone out of everybody else, and sort of sat down beside me and said, so what do you want to sing? And I'm a fan of, the songs that he chooses. So I thought, well, there's only one song that I really want to sing here. My wife was shouting to me suggestions of stuff that I sometimes would sing at karaoke. And I thought, I'm going to sing Feeling Good, because that's a song that he's known for singing. The audience here would like it. I'm just going to go with this. And I would say in the moment of that, the only thing that I was really aware of was I must control my breathing, because if I don't control my breathing, all that's going to go into this microphone is a squeak. And so I got myself, I did various things that I would naturally do on stage. I coach people to get balanced in their stance, because if you're standing on one leg, you feel like a pushover, you feel like a lightweight, you feel off balance. And so if you stand with your posture, so you're equally putting your weight on your left foot, right foot, toes, and heels, you feel more grounded, more balanced, more ready for action. So I did that, worked my breathing while he was introducing me to the audience. He was saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, live for one night only. It's Richard from London." I was like, "Yeah!" And then the band struck up playing behind me, or at least the piano player did. And then I sang. And the funny thing was that, I got 2 lines into it, and then I thought, I cannot remember the words to this song because it wasn't rehearsed. I wasn't expecting to sing. And then he had to shout the words to me or whisper the words down to me so I could keep going. But it was just a tremendous moment. I remember afterwards thinking, I'm so glad that I felt present all the way through that experience, that my mind wasn't sort of drifting off anywhere else. I was just a sense of, okay, I'm listening to him, looking at the audience. I'm going to have a good moment here. And even felt present enough to ask him for a selfie at the end of that. Just whipped out my phone, thought, this is it. This is the only moment. Got to get a selfie in here. And it was incredible. The next day, there were people in that arena that I didn't know were there, who were right at the back, who had filmed the whole thing on their phone, showing 20,000 people focused on my image, my face was then being filmed up on the big screen that was up on stage, which I didn't realize because it was behind me. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, that was quite a big moment. Like, I'm pleased I managed to,
Yes.
in my head, keep it as like an intimate conversation of just me and him, and then just sort of singing. So yeah, definitely a few techniques came to be very useful in that moment.
Yeah, it feels like a kind of a culmination of again, practicing some of these tactics, also focusing on the audience, which I'm sure in your mind you were starstruck. So it was Buble. You were focused right on Buble, but your impact
Mm,
spanned 20,000 people in that moment. And so
mm,
I think that's a lovely bow to kind of tie to this conversation. I want to thank you, Richard, for your brilliance today, sharing your perspective, especially, as we're thinking about, how can we kind of change our paradigms around what it means to make an impact and
mm,
leadership in particular. I know we didn't get a chance to talk about leadership within the workplace, but I think there's also a transfer of how we as leaders regulate to serve our people, and to
mm.
create that impact. So I would love to
Yeah,
have that second conversation at some point, because I think we could probably
sure,
spend some time between both of our areas of expertise. But tell
absolutely.
us where people can find you. So if folks want to work with you or they want to learn more, where can they find you?
Great. Yeah. So people can go to, first of all, go check out the book, Lift Your Impact, which is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Porchlight, wherever you get good books. Go and check out Lift Your Impact, Richard Newman. And if people want to find me on social media, then they can look at me on Instagram. I'm at Richard Newman Speaks. And on LinkedIn, I'm Richard Newman Body Talk. So you can find me there. And if people want to book me as a speaker, they can go to ukbodytalk.com and I'll happily come and work with them anywhere around the world.
Wonderful. Well, I hope your next engagement takes you to Chicago, hopefully in the summertime, so you can have your
Yeah,
run. But maybe we could also meet in person, which would be really fun.
fantastic. Yeah,
Richard,
certainly
thank
hope
you
so.
so thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.